It is November 13th and it is Sunday afternoon. This has got to be the last time I record this today. I am going to learn to edit, but I have learned so much this week. So I'm going to cut myself some grace. I am going to ask you to excuse my voice and my kind of wonky eyes because I'm coming off a migraine. When are we conscious? Presumably, I am conscious right now, although I may have to go back and watch this to determine that. Is merely being awake being conscious? Or are we fundamentally more conscious when we sleep? Isn't that an interesting question? I came across that this week. What's the point of sleep? Do y'all know that there are actually scientists who are working on this and quite proud of the fact that they think they're going to be able to remove sleep from the human experience? More power to you. I do not want to be in that study. Sleep is hard to study because it exists outside of consciousness to a large degree, right? There are other people that can watch us, but it's kind of a subjective experience, right? Our advancements in neuroscience and consciousness have led to a whole new plethora of thesis. I like that, and I can't believe I got it on tape, plethora of thesis. Anyway, I think that's a way of saying we think we know what we're doing when we really still don't know what we're doing. A good reason to study sleep is we will spend about a third of our lives asleep. 23 years. That's crazy. I never thought of it like that. We are going to spend yet another 7 years trying to get to sleep. So that's 30 years, y'all. 30 years. We might as well just not come out of the womb till we're 30 and never need to sleep. Wouldn't that be crazy? An interesting way to think of it. We're going to spend 13 years at work, 11 screen time, 4.5 eating, and a mere 1 year on romance. Sleep Matters on Gaia. Watch this documentary. Very interesting. One of the reasons I'm doing this, one of the reasons I'm watching all this, reading all this, I do this really in my off time. This is pretty much me. Scary, not scary, don't know. Is that I'm trying to become more interactive with a lot of fundamental areas in my life. But in this little segment, a more interactive sleep pattern, a more of a conversation. It's a parallel to my life, I would say. I am not one of these people who jumps out of bed and they're just wide awake. It is a long, slow crawl to consciousness, to just waking up in the morning. And it has been a long, slow crawl to consciousness. Like I'm talking the flip and the switch. There's a lot more going on. That's been a long, slow crawl too. I think in science, we compartmentalize everything. We sleep, wake, conscious, not conscious, when it's really not separate. It's all fundamentally connected. Sleep is fundamentally connected to wakefulness. If you don't believe this, talk to an insomniac. Talk to somebody that struggles with sleep, and ask them how it affects their waking life. I look at the resources that we devote to this topic just in our waking life. It's crazy. Take it down to something I understand fundamentally, medicines. Behind antibiotics, psychotropics, and sleep, it's huge. It is a multi-billion dollar industry. The obvious reason we sleep is because we need to repair, right? We need to repair our bodies and our brains. I'd say that that's been my understanding. We all know that there are cycles and there are stages, and we go through these stages and cycles multiple times each night. I learned something really interesting this week, that our brains make noise. Now, I think I know that. I've heard the little clicks and chirps and stuff like that. But when they're in this deep, deep sleep, the deepest stage, it is the strangest noise. I tried to get it so I could play it in the background. You probably have to go to Sleep Matters, watch that on Gaia to hear it. I would have thought it would have been like whale songs or dolphins chirping or something really peaceful. It's bizarre. If you're a sci-fi fan like I am, it sounds like when contact is made. It's bizarre. I'd love to hear, or are all our deep sleep, is it a fundamental frequency? That would be really interesting. It's a very strange sound. Check it out. When we're sleeping, the most time is spent on imaginative exploration, whether expressing the ideas of waking life or the images of dream sleep. The brain's default mode and primary enterprise, consuming more energy than any other activity, this area of sleep and consciousness. That's amazing. Even when we're awake, our brains will spend time in what's called the default mode network. Very curious. Check it out. We could do a whole episode on that. A thought I had is maybe it's the planet's way of coping with all of us, to putting us down so she can rest. Because I've always thought, can you imagine? Just take yourself, think about how complex you are as you go throughout your life and your day. There are 7.8 billion people of us doing this right now. How does the planet just not spin out of control, say, chucking you all? I can't stand it. Maybe it's these cycles, and the fact that half to a third of us, that's a really interesting ratio, are asleep or going in and out of these cycles. So it makes the planet a lot more quiet, and maybe she can breathe. The brain has a lymphatic system. I did not know this. I cannot believe I got to this point in my life and this point in my career. I mean, I know about the lymphatic system of the body, it's fundamental to what I do, right? But the brain, it's also, and this is actually some fairly new stuff too. It's how we clean out. It's how we clean house. The brain does that too. And if you think of thoughts and neurotransmitter, that makes it even more interesting. So what about dreams? There's going to be another episode on dreams, because the dreams are amazing. We all have the innate capacity to dream, and it's also a cultivated art. Isn't that beautiful? The more attention you pay to dreams, the more attention dreams pay to you. Much like everything in life, right? We've talked about where attention goes, energy flows. Same thing happens at night. And I love this. This was in The Secret Life of Sleep by Kat Duff. Developing a relationship with sleep and dreams is much like developing a relationship with a wild animal or a young child. And I work with young children, so that's apropos. It requires patience, it requires respect, and it requires responsiveness. Beautifully said. We speak so definitively, I've said this many times, about things that we probably still know very little about. Check out your average YouTuber, right? Me included. What if sleep and dreams are a form of universal consciousness? I had that thought as I was journaling and writing and developing the script this week. That would be pretty amazing. I'd like to know if that noise that our brains make in deep sleep, does it sound the same from individual to individual? That would be interesting. That would be, universal consciousness is something I find very exciting. Look at what happened during COVID. I will probably never say never, right? I learned that the older I get, but I'll probably never do an episode on COVID. But what if epidemics, pandemics, disease, and famine are our planet's way of sleeping, breathing, slowing down, much like a disease? That's what it does to us, right? We have to slow down. We have to sleep a lot more. Interesting parallel. What about nightmares? More on this later. I have always been particularly interested in nightmares because I've had them. I don't understand them. They frighten me. I have not wanted to delve deeper because I didn't want to know what was going on and what was happening. I find them terrifying. As soon as I can move through, forget, better. I'm thinking maybe not so much anymore. Are they our subconscious way of working through problems? I think that's really interesting. I've heard that about horror movies too, which I do not understand. There's so much horror in everyday life. To see it on the screen is something I simply can't do. But I heard that analogy once too, that it's kind of the subconscious way of going back and kind of working through that. And what if we're working through our problems in nightmares and they're red flags that kind of like ping, you need a solution, or this problem needs a solution. In my dreams, it seems like I'm always running from something, figuratively and literally. An interesting thought, something I read, what if this is a shift from helplessness to active participation in a solution? I really like that. That's very interesting. when we digest this and we think about all this and we think about what one thing has to do with another, think about this. I read this again in The Secret Life of Sleep, which is wonderful. I will link all this to ching. You can now subscribe to ching. I don't know if that's spell working to ching, but history and science are cultural interpretations. They're not absolute truths. I love that. I'm going to leave you with a thought and a saying from Winston Churchill. Another way to put it is, history is written by the victors. Winston Churchill. It is not necessarily grounded in fact. Rather, it's the winner's interpretation of them that prevails. Wow. A lot for thought. And I will see you back here next week. And I'm shifting this all around, and hopefully I'll have a background in, and I'll learn to edit a bit, but seriously, go gently into the world, into Mother Gaia. She needs it. Have a blessed week. I'll see you back here next week, and Dahanavat.